Hey everybody, I am here with Jeff from Martial Art. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on, Rob.
So
Is it Robert?
we're
Before we begin, I apologize. Robert, Bob, Rob. What do you normally go with?
The honest story is I couldn't possibly give a shit what anybody calls me. It's one of those things where like I try so hard to get people's names right and I try to get pronunciations correct, but when
But you don't give a
I've
shit
had
about your
people
own.
come up. No, I've had people come up to me at trade shows and be like, "Oh man, you're Dave from RetroRGB. Thank you. You've saved me so much money." And I'm like, "It's Bob, but you call me whatever you want if you're going to throw a compliment my way." So yeah, it's Bob, but
I like
I
that.
really don't care. So
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
but
okay. Bob.
yes.
Sorry
So
about that. I realized we just started the recording there, but
all good. And it unfortunately seems like this one's going to be very laggy today. Lag is the bane of my existence, both in gaming, developing, and in doing these interviews. So whoever's listening is going to have to bear with us. There's going to be long pauses. We're going to talk over each other, but I can't imagine people are not used to that by now. So, but if you wouldn't mind just starting us out, just could you just give us the quick blurb on who you are and maybe a little bit about your background, and then we could definitely go from there. And because this is an evening recording, I'm cracking a beer.
sounds good.
Cheers.
So yeah. So my name is Jeff. Some people know me as a chiptune artist. I do original music under the name JMR. I also am a member of the band Martial Art. We do a sort of hybrid chiptune, prog rock, post rock, original and VGM covers. We're kind of like a bit of everything in one giant melting pot. Uh, and in the past couple of years, I've kind of made a name for myself doing soundtrack recordings for video game soundtrack vinyl releases. So I've been sourcing hardware audio for a good number of soundtrack releases that have come out in the past couple of years.
So I have so many questions about all of those things, but let's just dive right into the meat and potatoes, and then we'll back out again later on. But what are some of the releases that you've worked on, and the stores that they've been sold through? If you just want to pick like a random couple to start us out.
All right. So the majority of the work that I've done has been for the Ship to Shore Phonoco record label. I've done quite a few of their releases, actually. I've done recently Breath of Fire 1 and 2 for the SNES, Bomberman 1 and 2, and Bomberman Hero, as well as a number of future Bomberman titles that haven't been officially announced yet. I've done the classic Fantasy Star game, so 1 through 4 for Master System and Genesis. Uh, I've done Sparkster for the Genesis. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't name anything that I'm not supposed to talk about yet. And my personal favorite that I've done for Ship to Shore has been the soundtrack for the Famicom game Gimmick. It's a personal favorite score of mine, so I'm really proud to have been involved with that release. Um, I've
So
also done work. I've also done work for another label called Streaming Arrow Records. That was a PC 98, PC 88 soundtrack from a game called Dragon Slayer: Legend of Heroes. That one was a bit of a collaborative effort with another guy because I don't actually own a PC 88, but I've been involved with a few releases there. And I've also got work coming out with another label called Very Okay Vinyl, which should be announced in the next couple weeks, couple months. I mean, vinyl record turnaround times are
cool.
inconsistent at best lately.
So the Gimmick one, I think, is the perfect one to start with because I think if you're listening to this and you don't know what that is, that was and please correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but that was a Famicom game that used a special chip, an additional chip on the board from the cartridge, not on the Famicom, to generate audio. And that was an interesting one for a while because emulation didn't always get it right. ROM carts for a while didn't get it right. Crix eventually worked his butt off and I think got it, but and then on top of that, you have to use a system that has the Famicom audio enabled. And then you also have to go through the whole discussion of what is the quote unquote right way to hear that. Is it just the original release? Is it another? And this is one that I've argued with Ace about, and I mean that with love, obviously. And I had lots of discussions and analysis with Artemio and the MD4EA team. So how did you even start getting the soundtrack from that game? And if you say you downloaded it off of YouTube, I'm going to shut this off right now. I'm kidding. I watched your whole talk. I loved it. I had to throw it in there.
So first thing for most of my projects usually begins with research. Like I usually look into, okay, what existing recordings are out there? Has anybody else done an existing Famicom recording or anything that I can use as a reference? So this is before I even had a copy of the game to work with myself. I wanted to see if the hardware itself was capable of producing an audio recording, suitable for a record release. Like you need to make sure that you're working with a baseline standard. And if I buy a copy of the cartridge and the audio out of the Sunsoft 5B chip is just noisy and distorted and whatnot out of the gate, is you don't really want to consider that as a source, right? Especially for what is supposed to be a high quality soundtrack release. So I found a recording by a guy named Brad Smith, aka Rain Warrior, who is pretty well known in the NES dev circles, and he's a video game developer and a musician himself. He had done a reference recording using his own Famicom hardware. I found a copy of that online, used that as a reference. He said, okay, you can get passable audio, but there's a decent amount of buzz there. Can I do anything about that? It was a bit of a gamble. So I in the end, I said, I'll buy the cartridge. Spent $500 on eBay, imported one from Japan. Gimmick is not a cheap game if you're not familiar with it.
No.
It is a late Famicom game and produced in relatively small numbers compared to the rest of the library. And because of the Sunsoft 5B chip, it's not one that can be easily reproduced using like clone hardware. Like there isn't a Sunsoft 5B knockoff that exists as a discrete chip.
Right.
And it's not something that exists in games that you can harvest from, right? There's only a handful of games that actually have the right variation of the chip to pull from. So yeah, bought the copy of the game and immediately, like within hours of getting it and testing it out, I'm like, okay, I'm hearing buzz and interference here. I need to see what's inside of this thing. Crack it open. Trace out the audio path, because if you're not familiar with the Famicom...
Well, can I just pause for one very quick second here? When you say you found buzz and interference,
yes.
Now you're talking about a Famicom setup that you already had, and you're playing
correct.
other games through it without buzz and interference.
That's correct.
So this one game is introduced, and you went, okay, what's different about this cartridge?
Exactly, yeah. So like I typically work with a modified North American NES, and the corresponding adapter boards that you need to run a Famicom game. I've put a lot of effort into modifying and improving the audio quality out of this NES. It's actually the one that I use for live performances and recordings for my band's work, for the chiptune elements in our music. So I've already got the hardware that is prepared. It's already got a relatively clean output, about as good as you can get without like drastic modifications, and also while sticking with the original hardware, because we could get into the topic of like FPGA hardware recreations, and that's a whole different rabbit hole to dive into. But yeah, you're right. This one game produced an exceptionally noisy sound that running an average Famicom game would not, right? Like running a stock NES game would not. So if you're not familiar with the Famicom audio path, on a normal Japanese Famicom, the audio is from the 2A03 CPU APU chip, gets passed through the cartridge connector up into the cartridge, where it will either get passed right back down into the system with a normal card, or if you've got an expansion audio chip, such as games like Gimmick or Castlevania 3 is probably the best known example for a lot of people. But it will have a mixer circuit that will combine that audio feed with the signal from the onboard chip, pass that back into the console, which will pass to the RF modulator or whatever the output is on a stock Famicom. So something in the on-cart audio path between that input pin, the mixer circuit, and the output was generating a lot of noise. So something that I didn't know this until I actually got the cart, cracked it open, kind of reverse engineered it myself. The Sunsoft 5B chip actually has an internal audio amplifier into it inside of the chip. It's actually embedded within that mapper chip. So it takes the mixed audio signals, amplifies it, and spits it back out. Now, amplifying audio is not problematic in itself, but when you're amplifying it in the same chip that has, like all of your cartridge data but like running through it as well, noise gets coupled in all the time. I mean, you can do things to improve it, like adding in a few extra decoupling caps and stuff like that. But for the sake of this recording project, I ended up just bypassing it altogether and
That makes sense
taking.
because
Yeah,
that's one of those things. Like from a nerd point of view, right? And people smarter than me are going to roll their eyes, but that's fine. I'm doing my best here. But from a nerd point of view, when you take something like an audio amplifier and you run that, even a tiny little one on a chip, and you run that through an existing circuit that has resistance on it that already has a pathway, anything that's any variance will change the sound. Now, that might, in most cases, it would probably just change the sound. Like you might get some more hum. Maybe there's a higher, like a higher frequencies pass through, because everybody's got to remember that these things were all built with 5% tolerance components or higher,
yeah,
because back when they were made, it would have been very stupid to use,
yeah,
to jack the price of these things up by $5 each when they sold
exactly. Yeah,
millions would mean you'd lose millions of dollars for a sound filtering that nobody would have been able to hear through their TVs
yeah,
back then.
yeah, exactly,
So
exactly. You're
yeah,
like the audio amplifier that's in this, and the circuitry that's in this is going to be built with the bottom dollar components, because I mean you're expected to produce these things in mass quantities, and the average person playing this is going to be running it through like the noisiest Famicom out through the RF modulator into the the shittiest sounding TV that exists, right? Like you're not
yep.
expecting audiophile quality out of these things. Uh, so yeah, it absolutely makes complete sense to bypass like the audio amplifier that's on there, because it doesn't serve its purpose for this, right? And now like,
Mhm.
you could get into like a preservation aspect of it, right? Like if you were say working on like an audio emulator, like if you want to work on like creating the most accurate NES emulator to play back the soundtrack, yeah, you care about that. You want to emulate the characteristics of that audio path, so that people who are playing it in on a computer or on like a Mister or like any other emulation platform that exists, like you want to have the at least the option of playing back the audio the way it would have sounded. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create what is going to be a an album that is going to be meant to be enjoyed for both the music itself, but also the audio quality. I
Mm.
don't necessarily want to
Are
recreate
you
the
in Are
sound.
you in the MD Fourier Discord? Because you sound like one of us. You sound 100% like one of us.
I am not. I am a very I'm very much an admirer of the work that's being done there. Uh, but
That's funny. Yeah,
yeah,
you might as well join, because you're already part of the team and you don't even know it yet. So
send me the Discord invite after this, because yeah,
absolutely,
like I feel like I would find a bunch of like minded people in there.
100%, yes. So, did you know when you started it what formats it would be landing on? Did you know it was going to be vinyl, cassette, CD, digital, or whatever else it was?
uh, Usually I'm told that up front. There's always a possibility that could change, though. The thing is, the work that I do is very much agnostic of the format that it ends up on.
Hmm.
I don't handle the actual mastering components of it. I usually just work on providing the best quality source for whatever mastering engineer that comes down the road to work on. So the recordings I do could end up on a CD, could end up on a vinyl, end up on a cassette, could end up on a digital download. The work I do is meant to be of sufficient high quality, and it's up to whatever label is putting it out to choose whatever format it ends up on. I don't generally have a say in it.
Hmm.
I'm quite happy to do the work for whatever format any label wants to put out the music on. Um, that being said, I will say that I have noticed that a disproportionate amount of my work has ended up on vinyl and only vinyl, which I do realize is not exactly. It doesn't appeal to everybody. It's kind of like a collector's item for some people, and it's inherently a flawed medium. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, we'll swing back around to that one. But what equipment do you use when you're to record this stuff to your PC, and what format do you record it in?
I typically use a Scarlett 18i8. It's an audio
Mm,
interface that I bought
okay.
a handful of years ago for my work with the band. Uh, it's got pretty high quality. I would say entry level pro. It's not top of the line by any means.
It's
So
absolutely fine for MD4A. It's excellent for music recording. I owned
yeah,
one of those and a couple of the others. Afterwards, I'll hook you up with a slightly better one for the purposes of what you're trying to do. But what you've used is absolutely fine. Zero
yeah,
complaints.
yeah.
But yeah, I'll upgrade you by the time this is over.
I appreciate that because I've actually this is one of the things I've been considering. Like, do I want to look into something like a reference grade audio capture setup?
Yes, but you do not need to spend a lot of money. That is the
Yeah,
one thing when anytime
yeah.
anybody talks about audio, it's like, oh, well, I don't have a couple of grand. You don't
Yeah.
need that.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
so
something I've been researching myself. I found I can't remember the name of it, but it was a package that was being sold kind of as like almost like a DIY kit, where it was like a like a reference grade preamp going into some sort of I2S interface, and that from that into a SP diff, which I would feed into whatever device I've got. Uh, but it was some combination of hardware like that I was looking into getting. So that's what I would use for recording what I would call like your analog sources. So
and
that would
which
be
operating system were you running when you were capturing this stuff?
I typically use an old isolated Windows 7 box.
Smart. Are you
Uh,
sure you're not on the freaking MD4A Discord?
well, uh, this is all stuff that I've kind of learned through trial and error. Like
Hmm.
this is not something that like I've picked up by reading somewhere. Like I've been doing this for a handful of years, and I've been doing like audio recording work for
Mhm.
much longer than this in general. So like I kind of have, I guess, a workflow that I'm used to, and what I've
Yeah.
kind of
So
worked out
for
over the years.
anybody, I'll skip to the end on this one. Windows 8, I don't know why anybody would use that. 10 and 11, all their native audio adds noise to the signal. And it's not something that's perceptible by the human ear, but it absolutely would be something that would start to change things like audio analysis, might affect mastering at the end type of thing. So that's, there are workarounds, but
Yeah.
using Windows 7, using a very specific version of the Linux kernel with the newest audio processing. I'm not smart enough to explain that, but there's going to be a beta build out there for people to test soon. And Macs actually, so far so good. I haven't tested the M1s, but up to the Intel ones so far have been good as well. But yeah, that was something that we battled with. Like, why am I not getting the same reading as you? And that's why we figured out
Huh.
you have to back. I think it was Artemio that figured out you got to back down to Windows 7 unless you
So
go some crazy workaround. So
so that's fascinating that we've got like people who have independently discovered like basically the same thing, because I've run into issues like I have a Windows 10 laptop that I kind of use for like my portable rig whatever, and
mhm.
I find that the recording quality that I get out of it isn't like there's I can't remember if I've ever actually quantified it, but I just was like, this doesn't quite sound the same. And I mean, like, for me, it was mostly a latency thing that was bugging me. But yeah, so yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I would. So anyway, circling back, the Scarlett interface is what I would use for the for like what I would call an analog source recording. So that would be like your NES, your Genesis, so on. For digital recordings, I try to get things down to an SPDIF signal that I can feed into. It's actually an old Sound Blaster PCIe card that
Yeah.
I've acquired. I mean, when you're dealing with SPDIF and digital signals, I mean, you have to worry about like making sure that you're clocking reliably. But other than that, like it's relatively foolproof. I mean, now I could be showing the shortcomings of my knowledge here, but
No, it sounds like you're spot on because the when the hardware was built doesn't seem to make the slightest bit of a difference. It's the components used and it's the drivers. There's a lot that goes into it to the point where we could probably do a 3 hour podcast on just that and not even cover all of it. So that's why when the last few bits are smoothed out, I'm just going to do one of my in-depth videos and be like, look, if you don't believe me, talk to these smarter people, but here's the solution. So but all right, so and then you save it in WAV, FLAC, 24
uh,
bit, 16 bit.
you usually keep things as wave for convenience, and wave with like a MD5 checksum file is what I typically hand off to a label. And I typically record at it's usually 24-bit and 192 kilohertz. I mean, depends on what sources I'm working with, right? Sometimes there's like no sense of recording that because there's no audio data in those frequency bands anyway. But
Mm.
it's one of those things that I choose depending on like the sources I'm working with. Obviously, if I'm doing a digital recording, I'm just going to pass it off as whatever sample rate and bit rate that I get the output from, right? Like, I
Yeah,
I, I I typically don't do very little post processing, so there's no real benefit to like pumping it up to a higher bit rate format. It's only inflating the file size, right?
right. The way I've been approaching this is with digital audio. It's I try to match exactly what it was, and
Exactly.
with analog audio, I do exactly what you do: 24-bit, 192K, and I do that just because that's the highest format you could record to, but that doesn't change because it's analog. It doesn't change the signal. So,
Yeah.
like, how could I make it easy? So, imagine like you're afraid that like the tunnel that you're about to drive through isn't going to be big enough. Like, so you pick the giant tunnel, even though the original one was actually totally the same size. Might as well just drive through the bigger tunnel so you don't even have to worry. It's probably the dumbest analogy I've ever used, but it also fits perfectly.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, it's almost like a bandwidth thing, right? Right? Like you always want to have more than you actually need. So,
right.
like, if in my case I have the tools and the methods to record at that level, why not? Now, like, I can't say for certain if it stays that way, but it gets handed off for mastering because again, I'm not the one who handles that. But
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I know the work that I do. At least I keep it as close to the source as possible, and I record at like as high as quality as my equipment can suffer, and that's generally what I would deliver to the record label, and they hand it off from there.
And Ship to Shore is a company that I hadn't really heard of till recently, till one of our contributors, Crystal, was started to write a lot of articles about pre-orders for vinyl and stuff through there.
Yeah.
And I kind of actually having more contributors start to talk about vinyl really got me into do the deep dive. And there are companies out there that absolutely go. I mean, they do what you do. They bend over backwards to make sure that you're getting a very good recording. And there
And
are
there's
other
others that don't.
companies that, yeah, I mean, just like the talk that you gave, they probably just downloaded something off of YouTube, slapped it on a cassette or vinyl, and then sold it at a premium. And it's
I, I I
mhm.
would be shocked if anything has ever been sourced from YouTube or piracy, and like a pirated source.
That was more of me just being
But
an
but but
asshole, but
but but
same
but the same
thing.
principle. They take the
Yeah,
source, like the easiest available source that is legitimate, and often cases it's audio that has been provided to them by like the rights holder. Uh, Konami is a known mixed bag, we'll say, because a lot like
yeah.
they have some good past album releases and some ones that make you shake your head. Um, so yeah, there are
So
labels that don't put in the due diligence. So yeah.
So what's it like to work with Ship to Shore? Are they, they're a good company? They pay you properly for your time and all that stuff.
Oh,
And
absolutely. I've got nothing but the highest of praise for
good,
Aaron and the folks at Ship to Shore. They're super passionate about this stuff. Like they care and appreciate like the work that I put in. They care about like getting the audio right. Now, I will say that like, some of their past releases are, like before I got involved, have been the same sort of thing where they get sourced from the audio that was provided to them. Their Lagrange Point. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Their release for that
me neither.
was sourced from emulator audio, I believe, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with the VRC7 chip, but that's only something that really got accurately emulated within the past 5 years or so.
Hmm.
Um, well before or well after the record release. So yeah, their past releases have been somewhat inconsistent, but since I've been working with them, they've put in a lot of care and a lot of effort into getting at least the audio work right, in my opinion. And yeah, in terms of like how easy they are to work with, yeah, they're great, and they're super passionate. And they're pretty big nerds about this. Like Aaron and I will be chatting about like game soundtracks that we would like love to release and things that are just like completely outside of the realm of possibility of ever being able to license. Uh,
That's
it will,
awesome.
yeah, like he's as passionate about the video game music and just like interesting music in general.
That's
And
really
he's
good
just a
to
really
hear.
fun dude to talk to.
I mean, I got to just bluntly draw my line in the sand here. I care what people are doing now. For the most part. I mean, there's
Yeah,
always that one
yeah,
fringe case where somebody did something in the past where you're like, ugh, you probably should never
yeah,
even talk to that person again. But for the most part, I care what people are doing now, and we're all humans.
yeah.
So
No, that's the thing.
how would you know that you needed to do this until you failed first? Like no
Yeah,
one walks into these things with $1 million budget going, I'm going to pay somebody to get me the best video game recording. It's like, no, like I got a relationship with this company, I got a relationship with that company. I love this stuff. Let's see if I can make it happen. And it's
yeah,
the people who take feedback, learn from that, and grow are the people that we all want more of. And the
yeah.
people that are like, it's officially sourced from Konami, so you're wrong. Those are the
Yeah,
people I have
well,
no time
and
for.
that's something that I kind of have to say. A lot of the labels who have made the missteps that I highlighted in my panel. Uh, there's one or two that I talk about in the panel that haven't really improved their game in some ways. They've kind of made a series of missteps, but I one of the releases I talked about was the Castlevania release by Mondo. They haven't repressed Castlevania 1 yet. I don't know if they have any plans to, but the feedback that they got for the Castlevania 1 release led to them sourcing new audio for their 2 and 3 vinyl releases. Uh, I have a feeling that if no one had complained, if they hadn't had the backlash that they had, 2 and 3 would have had the audio source from that same Castlevania CD that came out in 1990.
Yeah.
They stepped up their game. They've made the improvements necessary for their future releases. So yeah, to the point that you were making, yeah, like they have stepped up their game. And yeah, if you care about what most of these labels are doing here in the now, ignoring their past releases, yeah, most of the labels that are out there are doing pretty good work.
I'm really happy to hear that because I just, dipping my toe in the music business, which is exactly like the YouTube scene, by the way, behind the scenes. It's like, I could very easily imagine a scenario where a company like this would be like, oh, so you're able to get the audio. Well, we'll put your band's name on the recording if you do the work for us. And, we're an official label, so you'll get some free promotion, basically as they just use you and pay you nothing. So,
Well, it's funny you say that because Ship to Shore did put out my band's first album on vinyl a few years ago.
that's funny.
But no, going back to your question, yeah, they do actually pay me for the individual work that I've done for their other releases. So yeah, we do have a friendly relationship. We do kind of do favors for each other at times. But yeah, like
Yeah,
they're
totally different. Totally different.
totally different, right? It's not like they didn't do this as a way of getting out of paying me. Put it that way.
Yeah, it's I miss playing live so much, and I even miss the bad gigs where like we'd open for another band, and people would be like, "This isn't the band we went to see," and like everybody would leave, but like 20, 30 people would come back and be like, "Holy shit, the fat guy could play! Look at that!" Like, so, like I loved those; those are great, but I don't miss any of the behind the scenes stuff. I don't miss any of the drama. I don't miss the shitty promoters trying to scam you out of money. We had a drummer that was a little unhinged, and the promoter was freaking out because he didn't have enough people show up, and he was charging everybody cover, and he charged the drummer cover. On the
that's a
day
that's a
that the
screw up.
drummer had like a severe I mean I can't, there's no other way to say it. He had the turbo shits all night long. It's just running back, and if it were any other night, he probably would have thrown the promoter in a trash can and rolled him down the street. So it's just one of those like, oh my god,
Uh,
if that dude stops shitting, this guy's dead. Let's play the gig and get out of here. Like, I don't miss any of that other stuff,
see,
unfortunately.
like my band Martial Art is a bit like non-traditional in some ways because we are more of an online project than we are an in-person band. So we started off as a duo that was literally spread across the entire planet, right? Like, so I'm here in Ontario, Canada now. My bandmate for the longest time was living in Moscow, Russia.
Nice.
And so the number of times that we'd be able to play together were super few and far between, super inconsistent. And now we've actually like kind of like catamaried into a bigger band of like 5 or 6 different members from all different cities spread out over the US right now. And we're still literally spread across the globe. So like the number of, we don't have any fun touring stories or bad promoter stories because we've probably only played maybe like 10 to 15 live shows together as an actual band. Which is, it makes you treasure the memories that you have for the shows that you have played, right?
Yeah, and I mean, but that's kind of the wonderful thing about music is there's so many different ways to
Yeah,
absorb it. You could play it, you could play it live, you could create your own, and there's no wrong answer really.
no,
So
exactly. And like with like studio grade technology being like available at affordable prices for the amateur user, and like software prices coming down and stuff like that, like the barrier to entry for all this is super low compared to
oh
where it
yeah,
was like 2 decades ago, right?
yeah.
Even a decade
Before
ago.
I started spending a lot of time on retro RGB used to be a hobby. Now it's my full time thing. But for a while there, I was working a full time job, spending almost full time on the band and almost full time on retro RGB. So I was basically just balls to the wall every day. And I almost did a whole video series on the band's YouTube channel about how we recorded all of our demos. Because as somebody who grew up in the '90s, it's like how I mean, I legitimately bought a $10 knockoff microphone at a trade show once, plugged that into the mic in of my computer, and put that in front of my ghetto ass amp, and that's how I recorded my guitar when I was a kid. And now for like a $99 Focusrite solo, you could plug your guitar directly in and actually use that on a real album.
Yeah,
Like
no one
it's
would know the difference.
massively different.
No one would know that that setup was not the same thing as something you recorded in a like proper several $1 million
Or
studio.
you could take that wave file if you had the money and send it to $1 million studio to have it reamped, and it's exactly as if you were in the room.
Yeah,
Zero difference.
yeah,
You could run the MD4A recording on it if you wanted, like so. Yeah, it's so awesome now how people just have the ability to create music that's just not at all like it used to be, and I'm
exactly.
very happy for that. So what is your role in this band? Do you play other instruments and stuff like that, or?
It's kind of true to form. Like I am a nerd to heart. Like the work that I do in the band is the chiptune element. So I'm kind
Nice.
of I handle the programming of the Nintendo, the Game Boy, the Genesis. That's kind of the main hardware that we've been using. Uh, and I also handle a lot of the
Which model Genesis?
uh, uh, you're opening up a can of worms here. I actually prefer the sound of the Model 3.
So Model 3, the only problem with the Model 3 is it's mono, which
Yeah.
live doesn't matter, but
Well,
it's actually an excellent audio channel.
I've modified it to have stereo output. So the one that I use for the band work has I think it's a Variant 2 mega amp, like one of the like
Nice.
revision tube. So that's what I use for the band's output. Uh, Now the thing is, I run everything through a mixer, and like I apply effects to it live anyway, so it really doesn't matter. But yeah, the Model 3 does have a surprisingly good output, like a really low noise. I mean, it doesn't have that well, I guess the ladder effect that people claim to love for the 2612 variants of the chip, but it's certainly good enough for the work that I'm doing. And plus, I mean, I'm the one writing the music. I'm the one who decides how it's supposed to sound, so it doesn't really matter, right?
100% agree, but also I would argue that if you really wanted to get down to it, I mean, my actual belief is play whatever you feel like, but
Yeah,
if you really wanted to dig into it, whatever games were designed after the Model 2 was released were most likely designed with that sound chip in mind.
exactly.
So
That's
that's
how I
kind
feel
of one
about
of
it too.
those things too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could circle back to the recording work. I've had to do some Genesis albums, and typically what I would do is pick out a few reference tracks, record them from both setups that I have, and kind of pick and choose which one I felt sounded, objectively best. And I typically would work with the label to decide uh, what one we end up using. And we've actually like the my Model 3 Genesis has ended up on a handful of records. So
Yeah, no, I'm all for it. And
yeah,
the Mega Amp is excellent. We based the original audio circuit from the triple bypass off of that,
yeah,
and then that ended up evolving after MD4A came about. Then that evolved basically right through Artemio and that. But I
yeah.
mean, that's it was
I
pretty cool to see some people hear the Genesis 3 with a triple bypass in it, like for the first time. Like that is coming out of that. Like
Yeah, I
that's
know, right? Like the Model 3 has a like has a bad rap because of like I guess mostly not just the mono sound, but it was like left only. I think
yes.
So
It's not even under the model mono channel on the cable. It's literally just left only. You're right. Yeah.
yeah, so it really doesn't do the sound of the system justice by itself. But you slap in a new mixer circuit and bypass, like cut the right traces and do all that. Like it sounds as good as you could ever hope for.
Yeah. I gotta see. Maybe I'll send you one of my Genesis threes with the last version of the triple bypass in it, and just for fun, just to see which you prefer, if you could hear a
I
difference. And
I do find the mega amp as it was has a bit of a too harsh of a gain. Like I find it's a little bit too aggressive on it. Uh, actually, for a lot of the work I've done recently, I've actually ignored the amplifier and the mixer circuit altogether. I've recorded the uh, the the two FM channels and the PSG channel as three separate feeds and recreated the mix in post, just because it's
for what you're doing, I almost think that might be the better answer, because you
yeah.
obviously would have the knowledge to understand how to properly mix that. This is not, for the record, I'm not suggesting people at home should tap into those and
No,
mix
well,
that direct into your amp, but
no, it makes zero sense to do that for like a gaming setup, right? Like
right.
no one is going to want to, digitally recreate a mix that can be done with a handful of resistors and sound, close enough. Uh, but for the work that I'm doing, like, I mean, if I'm caring about the details and I've got the time and the means to analyze it down to like like down to the little tiniest details, takes a little bit more work, but I can get a slightly better result that way. So like
Yeah.
that's the method I've been using for the most recent stuff that I've done. I think the earliest release I did, which was Sparkster, that was just the stock mega amp. But I've done some work since, which I can't really talk about the specific games because
No,
titles
it makes
haven't
sense.
been titles haven't been announced. But I've been working on some pretty well known, pretty hefty stuff lately. So
That's
I,
awesome.
I'm like I'm itching to talk about it. Like I would really love to like give you an exclusive and say, oh, I worked on this big release that's coming out, but I unfortunately I'm bound by NDAs and
No,
such like
no,
that.
makes
So
sense. So one of the things that I've been kind of curious about lately, because I'll skip through it very quick, because anybody that follows these podcasts has heard me word vomit about this, but I have this very, very strong theory that, based on lots of recent listening on this setup, that the albums from the past sound best on whatever the engineer was listening to while they were mixing it and demoing it. So, like, if a band is getting the mix back on cassette tape, every night or every week or whatever from the studio, and they're listening to it and they're asking for changes, and then that's basically how they're presenting it, and then that gets transferred to CD, transferred to something else. I've found many cases where people with decent ears, but not even musicians, will not only like the cassette or vinyl better, but they'll pick out the reasons why, and they've nailed it, and they're not musicians. So
yeah,
they're not nerds like us that sit here and analyze this stuff. But of course, a modern recording that's designed to be listened to via MP3, throwing that on a cassette tape might make it a lot worse.
yeah,
So one of the conversations that I've been getting into, I don't know if you're familiar with Miss Mad Lemon, but follow her channel. Loved her last album. Loved every song off the last album. But she wrote and recorded it all on an Amiga, and she took the recordings directly from that. So the original recordings were technically analog, and then you download the FLAC files and they sound great. But I put that on a cassette via a Nakamichi Dragon cassette player, and it it
I'm jealous, by the
changed.
way.
Yeah, that was an
That's
amazing gift. That but it changed some of the stuff. So
yeah,
there's one effect that she uses on the Amiga's chip that has like a crackle sound, that it sounds clearer when I listen to the FLAC version, but when I listen to it on cassette, it's less of a crackle and more of like an ambiance that has the rest of the stuff blend into it. It was so interesting, and I'm saying all that to ask, like, when you do something like an original video game recording, I imagine that you approach this from, like, let me get the exact original, and it has to go through mastering. But
yeah.
do you know the mastering engineers? Do they take all of this stuff into account? Do they think about this stuff? You know,
Uh, they definitely take into account the format that the music is going to end up on. I can say that like, beyond the shadow of a doubt. Uh, I've heard the work of the mastering engineer. I really can't remember the names. Dietrich Schonenberg or something like that.
Mhm.
That's the guy that Ship to Shore uses. I've
Mm.
heard his work before it ends up, being pressed to vinyl. I've heard like the audio that he would pass off to the pressing plant. He's very carefully and clearly considered the requirements and the quirks of the format that it's ending up on. Like he's not just like slapping it through a limiter and bumping up the volume and calling it a day. Like he's actually
An
putting in the
easy
care.
mix vinyl plugin.
Well, exactly right. He's not doing like the minimum effort. Like he's actually putting in the work to make it sound appropriate for the format that it's ending up on. And going back to your point about albums produced in the era when a particular format was popular, sounding best on that particular format. I'm 100% with you,
Mm.
with the caveat that if you go back to an unmastered recording prior prior to, like, so if you say if you pick out an album that was produced in the 70s, and instead of taking like an LP cutting tape, which is going to be what was produced to actually cut the record from and go back to a unmastered version that is like the straight output of the mixing desk when the album was committed to tape finally, and go back and treat that properly as if you were going to do a modern digital release or something like that, like whether it be a CD or like a high res download or anything like that. And you, like I said, you treat it properly for that format. It can sound better. I won't say that it does. I'm saying it can
No,
sound better.
one of the tests I always do for people is "Beat It" by Michael Jackson, and
Yeah,
I have the original vinyl in a very good condition, and then the latest 24-bit mastered for iTunes version. And if you listen to both on a very good stereo, and when I say very good, it's relative. I can't afford
yeah,
$1 million stereo. I could
no,
afford a couple grand that I've been saving up for my whole life, and I love it. It's good for me, but
yeah,
everybody has a hard time picking which they like better. Funny,
yeah,
if you throw on the CD of it, that's hands down everybody likes that the least. But
yeah,
the newer version, so I mean, certain things kind of come out a different way, and I'm starting to think that the newer they did such a. I mean, obviously there's a lot of money behind a big name like that, but I think the newer version's probably going to be better. I think the difference that they're hearing is my shitty $200 phono preamp versus, if I bet you if I had a really nice phono preamp, they might like that better.
yeah.
But I mean, when you get to that level of scrutiny, it just means the new version's amazing. Whereas some of the other albums, like it's just like, no, there's no comparison. Grab the vinyl, grab the cassette.
So it's interesting that you mentioned specifically the mastered for iTunes version of Thriller of the Beat It of Thriller album with Beat It on it. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here, but yeah, mastering for iTunes. They actually have some pretty meticulous standards that they've got for, in
Yeah.
particular, the loudness of a mastered for iTunes release. So to get that mastered for iTunes little banner that shows up on the store listing, they have to meet some pretty strict requirements in terms of how compressed are the audio levels, uh, and they're actually they require you to have an uncompressed audio feed,
Yeah.
and they probably do some sort of processing on playback to normalize that to make it kind of sound like relatively the same as the average release coming out. But I've noticed myself that a lot of the things that like older albums that have been released on iTunes or whatever, with iTunes with the mastered for iTunes tag on it, do sound surprisingly good, and in a lot of cases better than the equivalent CD releases, because they've been mastered with much less compression and limiting than what they would have got away with on the average CD release. And I realize like I'm going to come across as like the biggest nerd. People go like, you listen to what? But ABBA is it's going to be the weirdest example, but a lot of their catalog sounds like garbage on CD for the average releases
Mm.
because they've been compressed. Like I think actually, if you look up on like the loudness war page on Wikipedia, one of their songs is the graphic that's pulled out, and the mastered for iTunes versions of their albums all are pretty much universally considered to be the best sounding digital releases of their work.
Yeah, I totally believe that. And obviously it all comes down to the mastering engineer,
Yeah,
because we ended up not mastering ours because I didn't like how the mix came out. There was this whole story. Everybody's got a story. I don't want to waste anybody's time with that one, but the person that we were going to use to master it was, and I mean this with so much love, but just the typical grumpy old engineer, like in all of the most wonderful ways.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things where, like, you know, that, that like they've been down the block so many times with this. They were just like, if you're gonna use me, you need to fix this and that. You need to do this. I do it right. And then I looked into a few other people that were basically like, yes, I know how to fulfill the requirements to be mastered for iTunes. And it's like, yeah, I could download the spec sheet too, buddy. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So it's all about the person and who has the ear to do it. And I do not.
No.
When I start working about mixing, even dialing in a guitar tone, that for me is like, first 5 minutes, if I can't get it, if I keep going, everything sounds the same. And then I wake up the next morning, play back the recording and go, that's terrible. What the hell was I thinking? I'm going to go back to the one I did in the first 3 minutes. Like,
Yeah. I think that's a universal thing for a lot of people who like record, mix, and master their own work. Like the number of times I've worked on a mix for my band and like, oh, this sounds great. This sounds great at like 11, 12, 1 in the morning. And then wake up the next day, listen to it in the car or on headphones at work. And I'm just like, what was I doing? Like, this does not sound good at
yeah.
all. I think that's a fairly common thing for a lot of like independent music creators these days because, well, I think listening fatigue is one thing that sets in when you're working late on these late hours. But yeah, like it's so easy to like spend your time like over tweaking and over dialing in things and making things sound objectively worse when you're thinking you're making things better.
Yeah, and planning on people listening on multiple formats is really hard
Yeah,
because there's very few people that nail it. I certainly didn't, but if you do end up nailing it, you get a scenario where if you listen to it on a tube amp, through some old school awesome or old school style speakers, you hear different things, but it's not a bad mix. It's like, oh, I didn't notice that before. Or you put your cell phone down on a table and it's like, oh, the bass line comes through a little more there, strangely enough. That's
yeah,
neat. Like, it's not thumping, but I could hear, like, it's a good thing. Whereas if you don't get it right, it might sound great on one but terrible on another. It's maddening. That's not for me. I'm not good
yeah.
at that at all.
And something like that I've noticed over the last couple of years too is the person who's working on the mix themselves will pick out and criticize things in their own mixes that the average listener wouldn't notice, wouldn't care about.
Yeah.
Even if you pointed out to them, they would never care about. And that's actually something that, like circling back again to the audio recording work. That's something that happens with the recording work that I do. Like sometimes I fuss over like the tiniest little details that I would notice. Maybe like someone such as yourself or one of the guys in the MD4A Discord would notice, but
Mm.
like just highlight them as an example. But like the average person who's going to buy the album, slap it on their Crosley Cruiser turntable and give it a spin, they're not going to notice. They're not going to care.
True. I
So
don't know if you ever heard the band the Cockney Rejects. They're kind of like famous from England. They did the song for West Ham United for a while, and they odd story. My friend knows them, and it was one of those things where, like, when I first started hanging out with this dude, I was like, "Do you really know them, or are you just a fucking crazy person that pretends like you know a famous band?" And fast forward a couple of years later, I'm backstage at one of their shows, hanging out with Mick, the guitarist, and I was just going through the process of recording the album, and like, I know you've recorded a bunch of famous bands, like. Man, I'm at this point now, and he's like, "Well, I just gotta let you know, like, you're gonna hear stuff that nobody else is gonna hear." I went, "Yeah, but I'm paying for it," and he goes, "You're right." So it was one of those things where it's just like, it's he understood both sides of it because he's the guy who does all the recordings for his band, but he also has done other bands. So it is one of those moments where it's like, I never wrote music for other people. I wrote music because those are the songs I want to listen to because I think they're fun to play on guitar. So I want to hear it the way I want it to sound. So it's kind of an interesting thing, always going down that road. All right, we've covered, man, there's so many things I would love to talk about, but I'm trying to cover the gamut here for people
we've
who are
got off on
not
a whole.
musicians.
We've got off on so many tangents I would not have expected to go off on at the beginning of this
Oh,
call. So
this is my
been
favorite kind of podcast. So, yeah, I mean, so I guess what other stuff have you done that, like, that you want to talk about, that you want people to know about? Because it's really hard, and I mean this with love and respect, right? But if somebody goes out and buys a soundtrack to their game, and they love the soundtrack, they appreciate it. How many people really go through and read the notes and see who worked on it? And like I said, I'm not saying that to insult you. I'm saying that
Yeah,
because I want people to know who you are. So, like,
yeah.
what other stuff have you worked on that probably a bunch of people listening to this might be like, "Holy shit, I have that one. I love that." So,
There's been a few things that I've worked on that I think would surprise people that like an amateur fan got to work on something of this caliber. Like I was involved with the Mega Man Legends 2 soundtrack release,
the
uh,
cassette from Ship to Shore.
cassette and vinyl. Yeah, uh,
Nice. I didn't know
what's
they did both. That's right.
they
Yeah.
did both. Unfortunately, due to a bit of a mix-up, I was not actually credited on the actual album art for that.
Aw.
Uh, Completely unintentional. Like, there's no bad blood or anything like that. Like, it was just like a simple slip-up kind of thing. Um, but yeah, like I think that's one where I feel like that's a soundtrack that is loved by like a very passionate fan base. And I want to say that I wasn't overly familiar with the music for the game, but I actually I had to kind of dig through and study it a bit for for the work that I was doing. I want to people to know that like we put a lot of effort into making sure that that audio was as good as you could possibly get out of that game, and it was a challenge. I actually had to work with a guy by the name of Squaresoft 74. I don't even know his real name, but he's like a bit of a legend, I guess, in the PlayStation music ripping community. And he has extracted the music out of games with like the weirdest compression formats and like non-standard stuff. He was basically the only person I could find who could help me out with getting like the last few missing pieces I needed out of that soundtrack, because I would say about 50% of the game you can record the music from like from a gameplay scenario and it's going to be accurate. I was actually able to like create my own version of the game that had the all the voice acting muted out, uh, which you can't do unfortunately with the stock version of the game. Like, it has like a little audio mixer that lets you adjust the level of the music and the sound effects, but turning down the sound effects doesn't turn down the voice acting. So I actually had to go in and dummy out all that audio on the game disc and do that. But that still didn't allow me to get clean recordings of everything that was in the game. So I was able to, like I said, work with this particular guy, Squaresoft 74, uh, and he was able to extract the audio in a format that I could work with and record. Like, this was a month long process to get the audio for this release. Right, this was
Oh, I
not.
believe it.
It wasn't something as simple as like firing up a game and copying files off the Git disk and loading them into an audio editor. Like, no, like, this was months of work, like many long nights up until like 1 or 2 in the morning, recording audio from a janky PlayStation that I bought on Craigslist. And well, like I say that, but like I did actually, like recondition it a little bit, and like I
Oh,
put
of
in,
course. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's the thing with some of this. The beauty of this is like it doesn't really matter where you get the hardware from, because if you treat it right, if you modify it right, it's as good as any as like your golden standard reference hardware would be. So,
Mm.
but anyway, yeah, like that's one that I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know from listening to it how much work went into it.
Mm.
Uh, there's a few more that I wish I could talk about where like
We'll just do
uh,
another one of these after they come out.
well,
It's all good.
yeah. So there was a release that was originally scheduled for Black Friday of this year, uh, that ballooned into something bigger than I could have imagined, and took months and months and months recording multiple games. The release got delayed and pushed back until sometime next year. I believe it actually might be Black Friday of 2023 now. So
Mhm.
when that one comes out, we'll have plenty to talk about. Let's put it that way, because
Nice.
that was a recording project that spanned multiple consoles, multiple games, everything from recording music from an S to extracting audio from like a Wii game and doing the proper conversions for that. So when that project comes along, when that album is announced, and we can, I'm not bound by that NDA anymore. I would love to talk about that one, because
Sweet.
that's a particular project that I'm incredibly proud of, because I the work I did to get some of the things, like some of the songs recorded, was like, it was more work than I thought it was going to be. like you think you're working with a particular game and a particular console that has never posed a challenge to you in the past, and you get to like working with it, and it's like, oh, well, this expansion ship doesn't behave the same way that I thought it would. Oh, I can't actually get this song to play in game with this chip. What do I have? Like, what's going on? So
Yeah,
like there's certain things that I've had to do for that particular project, which I could almost do like another 5 presentations talking about like the individual problems that I ran into. Like it was that much of a challenge.
that's
Um,
funny. So do you
so,
do all your own ROM hacking then?
uh, a lot of it, yeah.
How did you
I'm
learn to do that?
trial and error.
Hmm.
Like I do have like some education. Like I one of the courses that I did in my university years was a programming course that involved writing assembly for an 8088 processor.
Hmm.
So I mean I'm not unfamiliar with it, and I just kind of know enough to be dangerous, I guess. Like I can punch my way around with like the average debugger that exists. Um, Genesis is probably my weakest point. I had to do a little bit for Phantasy Star, but luckily there were disassemblies that were out there that kind of made it easier to piece together what I was trying to do. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, like I'm kind of self taught, and a lot of what I've learned to do has been specifically for these projects. So
I know this is a random question, but do you
sure.
speak multiple languages?
No, I don't. I took
Oh,
French in high school, and I mean, I'm from like the smallest town of Newfoundland. Like it's like a town of like 700 people.
are you
Uh,
really? I knew you were from Canada. I didn't know you were
what?
from there.
No, yeah.
I
That's
found out about that from the Protest the Hero song, and then come to find out, I got a bunch of people that I'm friends with that live there that I talk to all the time online, and I want to go to the bar that they recorded that song on one of these days. Like I'm gonna make a trip up there to visit
it.
all of you,
I like
all
it's a
7 of you that live
so
there.
so so that's the thing. I don't live there now, but like that's where I grew up. Like so, but the framing I was trying to give you there was like the high school that I went to. I had a class of like 7 people in the French class, and I remember days where we like our French class would be watching a Disney movie with French subtitles on, or sorry, with the French language track on, and then we'd turn on the English subtitles, and then we'd flip it so we'd watch with the English track and the French subtitles, and that's how we would do our French class.
That's funny.
Very little French was actually learned there. So like, I mean, I can understand a little peck of it. Like I can piece my way through a conversation if I'm under pressure and I need to, but I don't really speak multiple languages. No, I really should. Like, I'm living in Ottawa, Ontario now, so the capital of Canada. It's not the most bilingual city in Canada by any stretch, but it's like French would be an asset for where I live. So
I
I
just
probably
asked because I found that, and maybe this is just the people I'm friends with. Maybe this is not a scientific thing, but a lot of people I know that are just naturally pick up software programming are people that speak multiple languages. It's because the way your brain is wired to visualize things and hear them 2 different ways. So, maybe that's a coincidence. Maybe I just know a bunch of really smart people that'd be good at anything they put their minds to. But that was one of the things I always kind of wondered.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it too is like I do a little bit of other software engineering. Like my day job is I'm a hardware engineer for a company that I won't name the name of just to keep my work life and my
Yeah.
my home life and my hobbies separate. But like I do hardware design work, and occasionally I do have to interface with the software side of things and write my own code and try to debug other people's code. Um, I'm I can never say that I could write anything from scratch that would be up to snuff for any professional environment. But like, again, I know enough to be dangerous, right? In the sense that I can do enough to work my way through a problem if I need to. And that's kind of how I've approached all like the ROM hacking work I've had to do. I've had a problem in front of me. I know what I want the solution to look like. I know the solution is possible. How do I get there? And
Yeah.
it's usually a lot of fumbling around in the dark before I actually get anything that works. But
Knowing what questions to ask are always the hardest part to get to the solution to a problem.
yeah,
You know, it's like if anything that you do for the first time, it's like I don't even know what I need to do. Like,
yeah,
how do I even get to the end? What is the end?
yeah.
Like,
Like
so.
Yeah, like, coming to any problem like this from the very beginning, often you don't know how much you don't know,
Yeah.
and that's an obstacle that you have to overcome.
Yeah, and I mean, just to circle back to what we talked about before, I mean, that's why I really care about what people are working on now, because when you walk into a new project, like when I started RetroRGB, it started as a Google Doc, and I got about 30 pages in, and I was like, okay, I think I know everything there is to know about wiring RGB on consoles. And like, I if I had stopped there, I might have been that arrogant that I was like, I cracked it. And then, but I listened to feedback, I listened to other people, and that's when I had just gotten to the point to realize that I didn't know shit. Like
Yeah,
I knew I
like
just figured out enough to know that I didn't know a goddamn thing. So it's like, that's why I always have sympathy going in to these things, talking to other people about it, because it's like, if you read the first year of RetroRGB, I got a ton right and a ton wrong too. And it's just so, if anybody ever judged me like that thing you did 10 years ago was inaccurate, like I don't want people to do that to me, and
yeah.
that's why I don't want to do it to other people. So
Well, and like of the same like in the same idea, in the same vein, like I'm sure there's work that I've done either in the past or I'm thinks like I have to work with new hardware and new games that I'm not familiar with all the time. Like my most recent recording project was a PC 98 game. I have never touched that hardware prior to buying this. Actually, you
I
might be able
didn't
to see,
even know what one was
you
until
might be able to
Audie
see it
told
right
me
there.
his screen name. That
Yeah.
was about it.
So I worked on a recording for that, and I've never touched that. I've never touched an emulator. I've never played any of the games. Like I know roughly what the music is supposed to sound like. I know what the hardware is supposed to be capable of. But I don't know jack shit about this thing. So like I'm I'm sure there's like a possibility, just using that as an example, like for a mistake or an error to creep in. And that's where I kind of have to rely on other people to kind of verify and vet and check my work. So like this is something that I always try to do myself where possible, but like, I'll hand it off to people who are either familiar with the music, familiar with the game, who can kind of like vet my work and make sure, yeah, this sounds right. Oh, you should probably uh, this should have faded out 20 seconds afterwards because the loop point is actually later, like all this kind of stuff. So like I do try to prevent that kind of mistake from creeping, because I know the work that I do is not perfect. And I've actually had my ass kind of saved by a handful of people on a handful of projects where I've I've made an error, didn't catch it myself, and then passed it around for feedback and said, "Oh, this could be better." So
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, taking feedback is just, everybody's got to learn to do it.
yeah,
It's just one of those things where, do you want to get better? Well,
yeah,
I guess that's the best. So the fact that you're willing to just listen to people and move forward, I mean, that's what I rely on. I love when people
yeah.
give me good feedback.
Yeah, well, and I think it's important to incorporate that as part of your process when doing anything like this, where you're making something that is meant to be enjoyed and used as a resource for other people. Like you should solicit feedback, you should ask for that feedback, you should invite that feedback, because it makes the end result. It's never going to make it worse. Might take a little
Yeah.
longer. Might take a little longer to get to the finished product, but it's going to be better as a result.
And I'm always fascinated at what certain people have to say, because, excluding attention seekers, like one of the ones that I guess it's coming to mind because we're talking about music. But one of the ones that kind of blew my mind was the same guy, my friend John, who, who's friends with the Cockney Rejects. He came over one time when I was recording the album just in my house, and he was like, "Hey, could I be there when you record a song?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but dude, this is really boring. Like, it's not like you see in the movies." He's like, "No, no, I love this stuff." He's like, "Can I help?" I was like, I mean, you could hit record and play if you want, but like, I'm telling you, if you're bored to death, don't feel bad, just leave. And I'm recording, and like, I'm kind of sitting down, showing him how to do things, and I recorded a couple takes, and I was like, I'm getting cramped. Let me stand up. And I did a couple takes, and he goes, "Hey, can I just tell you something?" I'm like, yeah. He goes, "I don't know, like, I forgot what he said. He was basically just making sure that he was being polite, and he's like, but you sounded so much better when you were standing up." Really? He's like, yeah, it just, the way the notes were hit, like, it sounded more aggressive when it was supposed to be. It sounded lighter when it was supposed to be. I was like, I would have never in a million years guessed. Now, of course, if you go into yoga and you learn all that stuff, you do learn that your body does different things in different positions. So scientifically, that actually makes perfect sense. But no one had ever said that. I was
Yeah.
like, shit, that's right. Like, I only sit down when I record. Every other bit of practicing I do, when I'm jumping up on stage like a moron, I'm standing, like
Yeah.
it just, I would have never known if I didn't just take the time to listen to feedback.
Yeah,
So,
and it takes someone who's there early in the process to be able to give you that feedback. Because if you give that recording, if you had made that recording and sent it off to a friend for feedback, and he hadn't actually been involved in the early stages, they would not have been able to identify
right.
the difference there, right?
Yeah, I
So I
mean, you
mean,
just made another good point. Don't wait to the end,
exactly.
because
Yeah.
if somebody was like, "Oh, great album, you should have stood," I'd be, "Well, fuck you, buddy. You should have told me that 6 months ago when we started." So yeah,
I,
excellent point.
the next time I get like the guitarist for the band sends me any takes, I'll just ask him, "Were you standing when you recorded this one?"
Well, I mean, if he's somebody trained in the classical position, he would have been sitting the whole time he's been learning and playing. So yeah, yeah,
It's right. It's what you're used to, what your body has developed like over the time of practicing and playing on stage and stuff like that. So yeah, like I get it. It's not a universal thing that guitarists sound better when they're standing, but
yeah.
it'll be a fun joke in our band chat for a while. That's what it will
Oh,
be.
do it. Yeah, I do. I play caveman metal, just large, heavy thing. I mean, I play the way I look, just a large, loud person. So it's totally, I love it. The only other person I know that plays, I mean, Jesper Stromblad from In Flames. That's kind of half of my sound. But my friend AJ, who's the guitarist in Answer Infinity, another not small individual that plays kind of like I do, loves rhythm the way I do. Well, like it's kind of an interesting thing just to meet other weird metalheads, but love it. So where can people find you, and where can people find your band,
All right.
and
So my
the other music that you have released?
okay. So there isn't really a convenient spot to find like the soundtrack work that I've done because it's kind of been spread out over a handful of different labels. Uh, what is available is generally can be found on shiptoshoremedia.com. Um, and the one release I've done for Streaming Arrow Records can be found at streamingarrowrecords.com. If you want to do like a kind of like a general list of what I've done, there's actually a VGMDB listing for me that has
Nice. I'll link to
all of
that definitely.
yeah. It has the link is kind of too cumbersome to actually read out, but
Yeah,
it,
most are.
yeah it has like a pretty good like pretty thorough listing of all the like the work I've done as an artist, as the musician, as well as the soundtrack work that I've been credited for so far. Uh, as for the music that my band does, marshallart.band. Now I have to clarify, it's Marshall as in like the Marshall amplifier, so MARSHALLART band. That will bring you to our Bandcamp page. That's the quickest and easiest place to find all of our music. Now most of it is available on any other like streaming platform and service that you'd find, but Bandcamp is the way that I would recommend checking us out. Uh, and in terms of like our most recent output, we've done 2 albums in the past 2 or 3 years where we've actually prepared full length performance videos, all filmed in our homes and in our basements, that we've cut together, edited, and put together basically a video performance album to go
Nice.
along with so we've done an album of video game covers like that, and an album of our original material that's all available on YouTube, all available for free to watch. We're super proud of it for a band that doesn't get to play live, and we really didn't get to play live during like COVID isolation. This was like a great way of getting our 1 or 2 shows a year that we would normally do kind of like out of our system. Recorded, but we did these albums kind of basically like the same way we would do a live show. Like when we were normally recording work, we would overdub the crap out of everything, right? Like layers
Mm.
upon layers of guitars. But this was kind of stripped down into, okay, what can you reproduce live? Let's do that for an album. Let's do this for a video. So yeah. You can find all of that on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/martialartband. And we're on all of the social media pages, all the normal sites that exist, usually as Martial Art Band. We'll see which social media sites exist when this recording goes up, because
Fair enough.
we know a certain one of them is kind of right
Teetering.
now
Yeah,
teetering
it'll be there, but
in some form or another. Yeah.
And I'll obviously leave links to all of your social media and everything as well. So I would absolutely love to do a follow up at some point to talk about the work that you're under NDA for, and
Yeah.
also for when I go back and edit this and I realized I forgot to ask you the 100 questions I thought about at the beginning of this.
Yeah,
So let's
there's a
just
million and
follow
one
up.
topics that we could talk about.
Hell yeah, let's follow up after some of the releases that we are currently working on get out there, and we'll just kind of go from there. But thank you so much for your time, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure talking with you, man. It's been really fun too. Like I said, like this conversation has taken so many turns and twists and tangents that I would not have expected from the beginning of this, and I love it. This has been really
Me
fun.
too.
So thank you so
Thank you
much,
very
Bob.
much. Later.